Hey, welcome back to another dispatch from Hollie McKay. We're talking about a rather difficult subject today, or a tragic one. We're talking about killings that happened in Afghanistan while Hollie was there. Hollie, tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, this was really a sad, sad situation. So it was a Friday morning, and you sort of just hear this explosion. And as it turns out, presumably ISIS, although nobody's taken responsibility, attacked a school where there were hundreds of young Hazaras that were sitting a practice university entrance exam in an area in Kabul that is sort of known for the Hazara area. Just to backtrack a little bit, Hazaras have really long been persecuted in Afghanistan because they are a Shia minority. And of course, the Taliban and even the Pashtuns, Tajiks, everybody is predominantly a Sunni Muslim, whereas the Hazaras are Shia. So, that immediately sort of creates a rift and is one of the big reasons that they've been really persecuted, not just over decades, but over centuries, really sort of marginalized with jobs that they can take, not to mention the sort of kinetic attacks against them. So this was particularly searing because you're looking at targeting, and it was mostly girls. So the way that the entrance hall was set up was that the boys were sitting the exam, and they were in sort of the back section, and the women were in front. And of course, when the suicide bomber came in, he specifically targeted the girls. So that was just heartbreaking. You're looking at girls between really sort of 16 and 20 that were hoping to go on to higher education, that have lost their limbs, lost their lives. The last look at the death toll was close to 60 of these girls. And I'm sure in the ensuing weeks that has climbed significantly higher. And what was incredible to me was that it sort of barely made a blip in the international news radar. I mean, they're so sort of, when I posted about it and sort of just posted a picture outside the school of these weeping girls, it just sort of seemed everyone was like, I hadn't heard that this had happened. And to me, it was such a horrific attack and such a targeting of girls, of education, that something in a previous time maybe would have made headline news, but now it was sort of a blip on the radar. And that sort of shows you how sadly forgotten Afghanistan has become.
Yeah. Well, first, backtracking a little bit, you were there when this happened.
Yeah,
So you saw these people firsthand.
I did. And it was horrific. I went to school afterwards, and you just had these girls, and for days afterwards they were sort of lining up outside even though the facility was still closed. And it was just heartbreaking because they were there with their school books and they just wanted to get inside. And I'm talking to these girls, and every single one of them had lost a friend, a relative, a sister. A lot of them were survivors of this themselves. And some of them were telling me how they locked themselves into, cupboards, and were just kind of waiting for the attackers to come in. And that brings me to another important point. The sort of the limited media on the situation said that it was one suicide attack, but when I talked to the actual eyewitnesses, they said no, this was a very coordinated attack of about four men, gunmen that came in and they shot the guards, and then proceeded to kind of go in, and then there was one particular suicide bomber who kind of finished the job. But it's even unclear to me, and the Taliban won't give any details on these things because they like to project this image of complete control over Afghanistan, and that it's this peaceful and secure place. And so anytime these attacks happen, and mind you, they happen very frequently, the Taliban doesn't really give you much information. So I don't even know if those attackers managed to escape or whether they were killed in the carnage to themselves. Like, it's very unclear to me. However, these girls, when they were sort of describing it, it was being in a cupboard. They were calling their families on their cell phones, saying we can hear gunshots, people are dying, we don't think we're going to get out. Just levels of trauma that are unfathomable. And a lot of them tried to go through the back door, and the boys were kind of putting up plastic chairs and helping them kind of jump over the fence. So just really just a horrific, unimaginable sort of scenes. And so you're dealing in these aftermath with these girls, these women that are just so heavily traumatized. And There's sort of no help for them. There's no, a couple of the village elders, came to me and they said, we don't know what to do. But what was just searing was how much education really meant to these girls. The fact that they wanted to go back to their classroom, and there were these two particular Hazara girls, and they were just, it's that sort of pride that is so primal and so heartbreaking. And they were just wailing outside the school, and they were begging to go back in because they wanted to collect their books so that they could at least go home and learn, because they weren't sure when their school was going to reopen again. And so they wanted to be able to just be able to at least read their books and learn at home. And that really just gave me this chill about how much education means to these Afghan and to these Hazara girls, and it's really their only way of betterment. And it's sort of how much we take things like that for granted. And even after this horrific incident, that they didn't waste a beat in wanting to continue their education. So I certainly found that to be just incredibly heart-rending. And sort of when the Taliban eventually told these girls that they could go into the school, they sort of just ran for their lives. It was incredible just how much it meant to them. And the girls were, again, sort of, it brings me back to the challenges of working as a journalist too. And the Taliban, a lot of them were complaining the Taliban were laughing at them, as they were crying and in this deep state of trauma. And I sort of overheard some of the Taliban soldiers, basically sort of blaming them and saying, well, you didn't tell us you were having a gathering. How can we, secure the area or whatever when we don't know and you don't give us coordination, and really throwing it back to them. But the girls, when they really wanted to tell their stories and they appreciated somebody being there. But of course, and then a few of the girls wanted to take a selfie with me. Of course, it's an honor to be with these women. And then some very angry Taliban kind of came, and they came to me and was screaming at the girls and screaming at me and insisting that I hand over my phone, which I refused to do. And so they sent me to the police station. So it shows you that they didn't want any coverage of it, that they really wanted it kept under the radar. And our job as a journalist is to sort of tell these stories. And this Hazara girls, just the shaking and the trauma, and it's very hard to sort of imagine that this is their life, and this has been their life for a really long time,
and probably will be for an even longer time. Yeah, it's very sad. I mean, it's heartbreaking. It is the only word for it. It's cruel, and I'm glad you were there to be there, to see them, to be with them, because you're right. If you hadn't been there to cover this, it probably would not have even come up to being at the level of the blip that it did. So it's very brave, in one sense, and very sad in another. But I'm glad you were there, and I'm glad that you were able to be there for them at that moment. So thank you, Hollie. And hopefully other stories won't be as bad.
Yes, please read the story. And at the very beginning, I always say in this job, my job is not to change policy. I wish I could do more, but in the very least, I can at least tell the story. And at least to Hazaras, that's important that their voices are heard, and sort of the more people that can at least be aware of their plight, I think is a little step in the direction towards some semblance of justice for them. So please read in and understand a little bit more about what the Hazaras are dealing with.
Thank you, Hollie.
Thank you.